Hello, and welcome to another edition of Anne's Garden. Today we're going to talk about native plants and how to grow them in our own yards. And we're going to visit a garden that does exactly that. Let's get started. Today I'm here with my friend and coworker Laura, and we're going to talk about her garden. She emphasizes native plants, and as you can see in this film and then the pictures that will follow, she has a lot of really interesting plants, wildlife, and pollinators that visit her yard. So Laura, tell me a little bit about your native garden and how long ago did you start this garden?
So I have a yard that is between a quarter acre and a half an acre large. I'm trying to fill it with native plants and shrubs. So I dotted the landscape with a bunch of different plants, and I started in the fall of 2017.
So what kind of prep work do you have to do to get the ground ready to start planting these kinds of plants?
Well, I just dove in, didn't do any prep work. I learned by observing nature. I made mistakes, read books, listened to podcasts. So now I have a compost bin going, and I amend the soil with compost. But native plants are hardy. You can just plant them in the native soil, and they do pretty well.
Did you have to dig out the turf, the grass?
I did. I actually took some existing gardens and turned them into native gardens, but other ones I did have to dig out the turf.
Mm-hmm. So where do you get all your plants? And are they plants that you start, or do you use seeds? How do you get these plants?
Both. I use mostly plugs. I find those work better. I get them from Prairie Moon Nursery in Minnesota, but I also order from Prairie Nursery, they're very similar, in Wisconsin. So there are a couple semi-annual native plant sales in the area, but you can't usually just go and buy them.
Mm-hmm. And you definitely don't want to go out into the woods and dig.
Absolutely
in
not.
the wild. You want to buy from a reputable nursery that
definitely
has propagated them and not gathered them from the wild.
Yes.
So how did you get started interested in native plants?
Well, in 2017, I attended the Quad City Pollinator Conference. Doug Tallamy was the keynote speaker. He's an entomologist. Heather Holm also spoke. She's a biologist and native bee and plant advocate. This conference changed my life. I came home and removed most of the exotic plants I had started planting in 2014. So our native insects co-evolved with native plants, so they need each other. I've softened my strict policy a bit this year, and I bought some non-native plants to put in the gardens just for their beauty. But we're experiencing a severe decline in native bees and butterflies due to habitat loss and chemical use. So we aren't immune to this either. Pollination is how we get much of our food. So you take one part of the food chain out and the whole thing starts to collapse. So imagine if everyone planted a patch of milkweed or a little pollinator garden on their property. We could make a huge difference.
I once read how migrating birds will look down while they're in flight, and they'll see a monoculture that we've created now. It's just lawns. And if you just have a small garden, a pot of geraniums, and they'll see that red or that orange, and that's really attracts them because they're looking for food.
I imagine the same with butterflies. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the Certified Wildlife Habitat program that you have?
Yeah. So in the National Wildlife Foundation Certified Wildlife Habitat Program, applicants are asked to confirm that they provided a certain number of elements. So it's food, water, cover, and places to raise young, and sustainable practices. So 230,000 people have registered.
So it's pretty simple to just
Absolutely. Most gardeners are already doing that, and so all you need to do is go online and register, and you can either order the sign or the flag, and you can put it in your yard.
Cool. So you're a master conservationist, right? You went through that program. That's through the Nahant Marsh, right? Tell me a little bit about that.
I highly recommend it. We learned about wildlife diversity, prairies, grasslands, woodlands, wetlands, and conservation practices. There were fantastic field trips with fellow nature nerds. Nothing beats getting out in the field and seeing these plants and animals for yourself.
Sounds like fun.
It was.
So talk about invasive species and how you identify them and then how you eradicate them.
Okay. When I moved into my house, I had plant blindness and I saw a bunch of greenery, but I've slowly come to realize it's invasive species that are really taking over the yard. So I look online, use iNaturalist or Google to try to identify, and I've cleared a bunch of them out. And just in clearing them, I've found that native plants have come up on their own. So tall bellflower, Solomon seal, Joe pieweed, jewelweed, prairie trillium, jack in the pulpit, wild black currant, American germander, and small flowered buttercup have all just spontaneously appeared.
Wow. So you didn't have to plant seeds,
I
right?
didn't have to. It was a gift from nature.
And so diverse, too. Such a wide range.
I'm so happy.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what is the best thing about your native garden?
I just get so much pleasure from it. No matter what's going on in the world, or if I come home from work, I just walk out the back door and I'm in another world. I feel so comforted, and it's just alive with nature. Hummingbirds whiz by my head. Bees are buzzing around collecting pollen. There are a lot of colorful native insects. It's just a small, thriving ecosystem with plants at the foundation, and I love being out there.
It sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. This was great. I hope everybody enjoyed our little talk here and a little peek into a native garden. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have 3 books today to recommend, and they all go along with our theme of planting native. The first one is Bringing Nature Home by Douglas Tallamy, and of course I'll have all the information for all of these books in the notes below. This is a good overview of biodiversity and why it's important and how you can integrate it into your own home. Talks a lot about different insects and butterflies, how to recognize them in both their larva stage and in their adult stage. It also talks a lot about native plants and how to counteract invasive species. Next, I have Design Your Natural Midwestern Garden by Patricia Hill. This is a fun book. She's got a lot of ideas for integrating native plants into your existing borders or starting from scratch. Lots of different situations: woodland, sunshine, a hillside, a terrace, all sorts of different situations that you might find in your own backyard. She emphasizes native plants, but she also talks about integrating non-natives that are not invasive into your garden. Of course, the best thing about this is that it's for the Midwest. So it talks about plants that can handle the wide extremes of our climate here, from the cold winters to the hot, humid summers. Not everything can handle that range. And then finally, I have Lawn Gone by Penick. This is about alternatives for your lawn. Now, not everybody wants to do that. It will look very different, and you might have to convince your neighbors that what you're doing is okay. But if you decide to try this, this is the book to take a look at. It'll give you a lot of help, like working with neighbors. Because the first stages often are not that attractive, because you have to get rid of that turf grass that most of us have in our yards. And of course, it doesn't have to be just an alternative grass. It can be putting in more flower beds. It can be adding more ground covers instead of grasses. Reducing the size of your lawn is very important. Having a smaller or no lawn reduces fuel emissions, reduces the use of chemicals, and most of them are very low maintenance, so it reduces the time you need to spend taking care of it, which are all good ideas. So again, like I said, I'll have information about each of these books in the notes below. I think you'll enjoy them and find a lot of great information in them. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.